You are listening to Salty Believer Unscripted.
This is Salty Believer Unscripted. I'm Josiah Walker.
I'm Brian Catherman.
And today I want to talk a little bit about preaching. We've done a few episodes now on preaching. We did one that you just went over a ton of stuff. And then
The vomit one.
Yep. Then we drilled in a little bit. And you shared a couple of your favorite resources for that preacher who's just starting out. You used the example of a fan who listens to our podcast who just preached his first sermon.
Yeah.
And you talked about a couple books that he could utilize to kind of help him get a good framework for preaching in that.
Yeah, if you're listening, man, you're doing a good job. Anyway,
hopefully it helps. Hopefully you grab those books. I, on the other hand, I mentioned I was kind of a greenhorn, but as I was looking at it and thinking through it after our podcast, I realized I've preached some.
Well,
I've got a few reps under my belt.
What have you? I keep track. I listen to sermons, and I keep track of the sermons that I listen to. And for the last couple of years, you've preached, I don't know, 20, 30 times in your life, haven't you? I don't know. Maybe less than that.
Yeah, I'm like 15, 20, 20 times.
So here's what happens, though, that's really good. So you've done I get to preach this year once or twice, right?
Yeah.
So then you spend 6 months thinking about your text and work, which I
have all my sermons written in the back of my Bible.
Oh,
and
that's a cool idea.
Just every time I've preached, and I've got them organized by like date and stuff.
Pretty soon you're going to have to stop doing that.
I'm going to run out of Bible.
Yeah, you're going to have,
And if you're preaching every week, but it is funny, because the first year I preached one time. Then the next year it was like 3. Then the year after 4, and it slowly multiplied. This year, I've already preached 5 times. Last year, I preached 8 the whole year.
At the time of the recording, you've preached 5 times, and we've had 5 Sundays.
Right. Well, I know, right? Which is crazy, because to your point, like, I remember taking, like, when you first were giving me Sundays to preach, I'd spend a month and a half, 2 months really looking at that text. I just about died this month while you were gone.
5 in a row, man.
It was like every Sunday, the clock reset.
Well, so here's the thing. This is the thing that a lot of guys... preachers, they don't realize until they have to do it.
Right.
And for me, it was when we planted the church that it really set in.
Sure.
When you don't have a regular, ongoing rhythm of preaching, and I'm not talking about like I lead a Sunday school class. Right. I mean like you're getting in the pulpit, no one's talking back.
It's not a conversation.
You're working through the process. It's one thing when it's every other week or every 3 weeks you're preaching, or maybe like you said, you got to preach 3 times this year, or when you start preaching and you have some back-to-back stuff.
Right.
That really stretches your preaching because one, you start finding out, I say this a lot. Oh, this is my dog and pony show that I go to every time, right?
I realized I always put a gospel message in my sermon, and I usually do the same one every time because they're about a month and a half apart.
No one catches it.
You were gone. I was like, I got to say this differently this week.
There's just different.
It's a different animal.
You need a different approach so that you have a method to have a fresh way to approach the way you're communicating and what you're doing from the text. So
that's what
changes, right?
That's what I want to talk about today, because I feel like the books you mentioned were great if you're kind of just starting out, but now I've preached for a while. So what do you do when you already know you're called to preach, you're preaching pretty regularly? How do you kind of have an ongoing tool, resource to help with that?
So the tool I'm going to suggest is not a tool for the process of preparing sermons. That'd be commentaries and guides, but this is a
just
tool
like a
to help you.
sharpen the saw.
Yeah, this is what I went to. And so I've read a lot of books on preaching. I'm not a good preacher, so I just keep reading books with the hope that it'll make it better. But I did, a doctoral seminar through it, which was wonderful. I'm gonna throw this out for those who want to get better at preaching. And then if you can't do this, I'm gonna throw another avenue that might work.
Okay.
But we've had these guys on the podcast, the Charles Simeon Trust.
Oh yeah,
guys. So David Helm, he wrote the 9 Marks preaching book. That's really good.
The orange one, that's great.
Yeah. So David Helm is the founder and president, I think is the title, in that organization. The guys are fantastic, and they do. So if you go to Charles Simeon Trust, I can't remember their exact website actually, but Google it.
I think it's Simeon Trust.
SimeonTrust.org or something like that. So you go to the Trust, Simeon Trust or Charles Simeon Trust. They have a bunch of free resources you can listen to. I would go and check those out, listen to those. They have online courses that are $19 and well worth it.
Okay.
So I've done some of those. You start with the one called First Principles. That gives you the structure, layout of this is how you should think about a sermon. This is how this should work. David preaches and teaches most of those. Then they usually have like examples of preaching from that.
Nice.
But then from there, you can go in any of the courses you want. But they're, I'm trying to think, epistles. How do you preach epistles? Wisdom literature, apocalyptic literature, prophets.
Wow, interesting.
They have a really good one called argumentation. So it's how you employ argument in your sermon. So you're compelling, you're pleading in a way that makes you think more like Paul, right? So you take these courses.
So I'm in seminary right now. I'm taking some courses. What's the time kind of commitment on these Simeon and Trust courses you're talking about?
So you can take, they have a system, you could take these for academic credit.
Sure.
With a certain...
But like, is it 3 hours a week? Is it a 3 hour course?
It depends on you. So you buy the course for $19, you get a year in the course. The course has a syllabus. Every course that I've done, it has like a, I don't know, 20 to 50 page resource guidebook of the stuff they're teaching you and showing you. Then it usually has about 8 or 9 or 10 different professor lecturers. And like, so for example, I think Tom Schreiner, who is a commentary writer, I can't remember which one I saw him in, Pennington, what's his name? Jonathan Pennington from Southern Seminary, some guy from, Reform School, this guy, Joel Beakey, like all these people have provided help in the lectures. Chapel, I'm just thinking of all these people. So you get a wide variety of their best work in those lectures.
So you can work on your own pace through it.
Yeah, so the videos are like 20 to 50 minutes long, depending on the video. Then you have a sermon sample, so you can and then you just mark it complete, work your way through it. And then if you want, they have exercises. You could, if you really wanted to jump in on those exercises, if you did it with a group of guys, you could go through a thing and then use their worksheet and preach a sermon to each other with the worksheet and actually employ exactly what they just showed you. So you could really extend this out.
Okay.
Or you could shorten it down, watch the lectures, think about it, take some notes, and be done with it. It's really your call, but you get the course for a year. Those are the online courses. They're fantastic. You get to a point where you start to hear some of the same concepts a little bit because they're really reinforcing some, but you're getting new concepts as well. But like, so you'll hear like, cut it straight. It's kind of an idea of, something they're teaching, and you'll hear that over and over and over again. And so they have the online courses. They do workshops around the country. I'd love to have them come out here, but I don't know how many people would be interested. Sure. It's kind of complicated. So they do workshops around the country. You could sign up, and you can go look at the schedule. Brett Risley, who used to be on the podcast a lot, went to a workshop, said it was awesome. And that's like a hands-on teaching on a topic, and they have a few of their folks go out to that. Then they have the Chicago course, which if you're in Utah or California or in the West,
it's only in Chicago, right?
It's a little tougher. That's like a weekly, I think it's weekly class in Chicago.
Wow.
But like if you could go to that, and it sounds like that's great. They come in and they teach. Maybe they have intensives. I don't know. And then, and all of these are for guys who are either starting to preach, just getting going, or really wanting to refresh.
Yeah.
I found it to be refreshing. I go, oh man, that's such a good point. I missed that or this. And then they do a podcast, which is, if you're listening to this podcast, you listen to podcasts.
Right.
We had them on our podcast.
We did.
The Preacher's Talk podcast. It's supported, sponsored by 9 Marks. So you find the one that's like Preacher's Talk by 9 Marks, and then it starts out. They're like 20 minutes, 30 minute maybe.
Pretty much. Kind of
20
like
minutes, like ours.
Yeah.
Unscripted. We actually took the introduction of ours where you introduce yourself, and then I introduce myself. We stole that from them.
Borrowed.
So, because it's helpful. Because I heard them do that and went, oh, now I know who's talking. And they talk about preaching. It's a podcast for preachers and those who love preaching. And it's great. And I would suggest go to the beginning of it, because some of the stuff they do kind of builds on itself.
Right.
But they do, every 2 weeks or so they put out a new episode. David Helms on that one and their crew, and it is really fantastic. So those are, other than like if you were actually to pay to go to the Chicago course or go to a workshop, the free resources, they're free. The podcast is free.
Okay.
And then I would really encourage, do the First Principles course. Is this going to be the end-all, be-all? No.
Right.
No, it's not. But you've asked me, what's the next one thing I can do?
Right.
And that would be it.
Because I feel like especially if you're preaching more regularly, like when you were gone and I preached every week, I don't have a lot of time to really dive into a ton of stuff.
Right. You're not going to go take a seminary course.
Something that I could just sharpen the saw a little bit, get in better at, grow in.
Yeah. And then a lot of their methodology is that same with that preacher's book, which we talked about in the resources. So that's Charles Simeon Trust. SimeonTrust.org, I think, is the website.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend it. I think we linked to that website in the Salty Believer site. So.
Yeah. And they were on our podcast, so you can listen to those.
Yeah, they're great guys, man. They're great guys. Good preachers. I'm going to listen to
If you listen to this podcast, you should listen to theirs, because it's amazing.
And it will make our podcast look silly.
Like, who are these two guys? These guys are amazing.
So that would be my recommendation for someone going, okay, I'm preached a couple times, 10 times, 2 times. Right. If you've never preached, it's still a good start. Well, but part of it is you kind of need enough to go, oh, I get what he's saying there. You need to work through that.
You've been preaching for what? How many years?
A lot of years. 12 years.
And you just started watching that. Is it helpful for you,
too? So
even to sharpen the saw now?
Yes. So I started preaching, I guess my first sermon ever was at a homeless shelter. And I think it was 14 years ago.
Okay.
Then I started preaching at the church where I was on staff about 12 years ago. And like you, I'm like, oh, I get to preach 4 times this year. Yay! And it kind of grew and grew. And then we planted the church. And then I was preaching pretty much almost every week, minus we were doing a team ministry thing.
Yeah.
And that was, 2014. I've been, preaching. Okay. I don't preach 52 times a year because we bring you guys on.
But you at least get like 30 reps.
I probably get 40 reps a year.
Okay.
Because I'll preach other things too.
So
sometimes one season I got a lot more than that. Some seasons,
Yeah. Morning services, evening services.
With you here, and then also we had Robbie. Yeah. I'll probably do 40 this year. Probably get 10 or 12 this year, I think.
So,
I don't know. You're in school. I don't know.
Where you're more seasoned, where you've preached more, you went and listened to that First Principles. Was it like, I know all this stuff.
No,
this is basic.
No, it was really helpful. I mean, some of it was a good refresher, but I picked up numerous things. Now I just finished John Broadus's book, The Father of Expository Preaching. I have listened to so many things. I've gone through doctoral seminars. I have a master's degree with preaching and preaching labs. I mean, that shelf behind me, you heard the vomit, right?
We know the resources.
Okay.
Yep.
I still went, oh, that's a good point.
Okay.
Oh, wow, that's great. Okay. I was listening to one, I'm doing a course right now, and I was just painting and listening, going, oh, yeah. Occasionally I'm like, they'll throw it out to the crowd. Okay, what do you see here? And I'm like, well, this, and then if you do that. But then most of the time, it's still either a good aha or a good reminder.
I was going to say, yeah. Reminder, refresher.
They're right. I need to do that more. Occasionally I go, I see how they're handling the text, but I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
There's different styles. The thing I really do like about it, though, is the people that are involved have different styles. I don't preach one style, but I kind of preach the other style. So it's not about style. It's about the foundational methods and what you're doing.
Because, you preach different than I do.
Yeah.
So it's not just better, but different.
Which you got to find you. Right. Okay, so that's what I would recommend people go to, and there are free resources there. Yeah. Now, I've done something else that I found very helpful too, and I think the thing I find the most helpful is pitting these resources up against each other, comparing, contrasting, analyzing them together, and then you start to see a reoccurring theme.
Have you ever noticed how every time I name one thing, you always have like 2?
I know.
That's the recurring thing I'm noticing.
Well, this is a really exciting topic for me.
Okay.
I think this is probably my favorite topic in Christian ministry.
I get that. So what's the next thing?
Okay. So this is if you can't go pay the $19.
Okay.
Or if you... So... And it's similar, though. It's free. If you just search around a little bit, there are tremendously good, and there's also tremendously bad, free preaching resources.
Okay.
All right. So
you just Google preaching resources?
I'm going to point you to some that I've found to be a little bit more helpful. That podcast, the Preacher's Talk, is free and easy, and it doesn't take up a lot of time, but they suggest and recommend some things here and there.
Okay.
So track some of that stuff down.
Sure.
That helps. Listen to good biblical preaching from the past. Mm-hmm. And you can listen to some modern preaching today, but don't just go to the super big famous guys.
Okay.
Find some really faithful, good preachers that you learn that teach you the Bible. Listen to them fairly regularly.
There's one thing I've noticed about big famous guys, too, just while we're on the subject. Sometimes they start out really faithful and really solid. And then as they've grown and become more famous, it feels like things slip a little bit.
Things are shifting.
So I think that's a good point. Don't always just go to the most recent famous guy.
Here's what I like. I listen to and read old sermons. I say listen to because there's some podcasts that you can hear people read them. And then I also listen to sermons that are kind of around the turn of the recording, like a Martin Lloyd-Jones. Obviously, the style and certain things are going to be different. Sure. And the context is going to be different. And then you listen to some more modern people, and you listen to some people, and what you find is common themes, common methods, common tools that really teach you a lot. Hip, cool buzz language doesn't teach you anything.
Right.
And so you pick up on that real fast when you listen to a sermon from 1981.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you listen to a real faithful person
Right.
from the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
Dick Lucas does not have that kind of language, and he's, over the pond. So you're hearing a certain thing, but then also other people do that. Oh, Kevin DeYoung is doing this, and
Right.
and then you start to see other guys not do it, and you're like, you know what you're missing.
That's a good point. And I do that sometimes too after I preach the message. Is I'll go find some faithful guys who have preached that text and see what they said.
And then you learn from it.
If I do it before I preach, it messes up my whole sermon, and I feel like I have to rewrite it. But after the fact, I'm like, oh, okay, interesting.
I see what they did there.
Yeah.
I see how they taught it, and you start to get really accustomed to that. And so those are things you can do that would edify you.
Yes.
And they're free.
Sure.
And then, you can find John Piper talks about his whole process on YouTube. Just search John Piper on preaching, and I think he has this whole course I watched where he just talks about what he does.
I saw that course. That is a good course.
This is what I do, he says. Not this is what everybody should have to do,
Right.
but this is what I do. If you have a pastor who's preaching regularly and you're just learning, ask if you can see his notes and manuscripts and talk about what he's doing beforehand or afterhand, or why. Hey, walk me through why this, why that. Right. Start just thinking about preaching in a new way.
And I've done that a few times. I've approached pastors and asked them that. And it's not always necessarily to copycat what they do, but it kind of gives you a starting point or an idea.
Well, let me put it this way. Let's say you want to be a home builder.
Right.
Okay? If you just looked at houses and said, I can build that.
Right.
You don't know what's behind the plaster. Right. You
That's
don't know why the wiring was done the way it was done.
Right.
What
do you put down first?
You don't know there's a foundation because it's below the dirt line. You don't know why you put the framing up before you put certain pieces up. So you can't just reproduce a final product that you see without understanding the 12 to 25 hours of what goes into it. And so I think it's Dr. Plummer that always says this, but he says, Greek, he uses it about the Greek language. Greek is like underwear. It holds things up and everyone knows you have it, but nobody needs to know you see it. That's how he talks about Greek knowledge. So if you don't know what's there, you're copying what other people are doing. And when you're copying what other people are doing, you don't realize it, but you start to look pretty silly. Right. I know I did that when I first started preaching. Sure. Oh, that guy, he yelled and shouted in this way, or he did this, or look what he did. I'm going to do that. I don't know the method of why he's doing it. But it looked cool, so I'm going to do it. And that doesn't work.
Loud noises.
Didn't work like he did it. What's really hard is really being a student of preaching, listening to a lot of preaching, thinking about a lot of preaching. Pretty soon you know exactly when people are doing that. Right. You go, well, that's interesting. You got that from your favorite so-and-so. I saw that. And I've trained up some guys that have kind of really done that.
Yeah.
And you just say, get away from that. That's why you shouldn't go listen to the same preaching on the sermon you're going to preach. Don't copy that.
No, because if anyone else has listened to that, it shows through.
They know in a second.
I mean, it just devalues everything you've said. It's not faithful to God's word.
Even if you didn't plagiarize anything, you just start copying the style. Right. Just be you, right? But it's hard when you don't know who you are because you only preach 6 sermons. But here's the deal: you know who you are,
right?
So just be you.
And if God's called you to preach in that place, in that location, at that time, He's giving you what you need.
Just go do it. So you don't need to pick up on all the other stuff. So Charles Simeon Trust is going to really give you some good nuts and bolts if you need one place to go. Okay. And then just study and think about preaching. I'll listen to sermons and go, how would I have structured this text? Oh man, that guy really did structure this better. Yeah. No, I could have. I think you missed a point here.
Right.
Wow, what an opportunity. Well, what about? I really like. Not just I like that. That's cool. Right. But that helped make his argument better. Wow, his timing. Wow.
Right.
He's calling this out, and it seems aggressive. And then critique your own preaching the same way, as miserable as it is. Watch your own sermons when you're done.
Listen is pretty miserable. But
think about it.
Yeah.
Just you don't have to do it every time, but you should really think about what you're doing and critique your work.
What's great about that too is that when you're watching these faithful guys and you're studying God's word more and you're using these resources and tools, when you see somebody miss it, you see him miss it.
Oh, you see him miss it. You're like, brother.
I mean, I heard a guy the other day preach about two guys in the Bible that were starving.
Yeah, you tell me about this.
They were starving because there was no food in
There was
the
a
land.
famine because the Romans, or
Right.
not the Romans, the enemy had sieged the town
Yeah.
and they couldn't go out and get food, right?
And his main point was, well, if you fast, God will bless you. I'm like, these guys weren't fasting by choice.
No, right.
So,
You go, what? What? Just hold on.
but they
You're
ended up
not
going into the
David.
city and everyone was gone. So he's
Why
like,
are
see,
you
God
clapping?
honors that. I'm like,
Talking
I
about
know.
you.
Maybe God honors me when I fast, but that's not what was going on in this text.
I remember a very prominent individual who should have known better was preaching to make a point, and I was excited. Like, wow, this person worked in the seminary field. This person's led massive organizations, speaks at stuff, preached about the church and the letters in Revelation that lost their first love, and I suddenly am drawing a blank on which church that is. You lost your first love. Who? The people listening are like, it's this church. I can't remember. Anyway, and then he just jumped to, and your first love is doing evangelism. I'm like, where's that? in the text? What? Well, you should. What? I think we all can do that.
Sure.
But if you really take it
Even if
seriously-
you're trying to be faithful, you can mess up.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Oh, yeah.
and that's why it's important to really be in God's Word.
You know what I also just, that Charles Simeon Trust stuff is they recognize where you're at. Sure. So when you listen to the podcast, they know.
Have you ever listened to their stuff and you've gone, oh, I screwed that up. I preached that text.
No.
They're right.
Or,
Yep.
yeah. Or like, oh, you don't really want to do this because it does that.
You're
And
right.
I mean, one of their
Guilty.
courses, they have a section, I think it was on, it's in the first principles, I think, about presentation. And I'm like, oh, yeah, when I do that, that is exactly what everybody does. You know, they think, I got to stop doing that. and you realize, I've been doing that for a long time. But if you're going to faithfully handle the word and really love a church and shepherd a church, you've got to keep seeking not to improve in the cool and hip and what's trendy today, but how am I handling the word in a way that's feeding a nutritious spiritual diet to this church in which God has called me to pastor and preach to. And I think those guys really help with that. And they have the same heart. They love the church, and they have a real big heart for preaching. So that would be it. Charles Simeon Trust, which is simeontrust.org. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to hear my church say that was cool. I want to hear him say that was faithful.
I want to hear that really helped.
Yep. So.
That really helped.
So Charles Simeon Trust, check that out, as well as their podcast, Preachers Talk. Let them know that Salty Believer Unscripted sent you over there.
Yeah, and if you guys are listening, we'd love to have you on again.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening. Find more information at SaltyBeliever.com.